All right, so for some analysis on this, let's bring in Shahram Akbarzadeh, who is a professor of Middle East politics at Deakin University. He joins me now live from Melbourne in Australia. Great to have you here with us on TRT World. What's the likelihood that Israel and Hezbollah will go for an all-out war? And if that happens, isn't it fair to say that the Israeli army is already exhausted in Gaza and they're going to have a tough time if they go on a war with Hezbollah now?
Right. Well, thanks for having me. Absolutely right. I think Hezbollah and Israel, neither of them would want to see an all-out war, but both of them are saber rattling. Hezbollah doesn't want to look weak. Hezbollah is very much into projecting power and projecting its support for what's going on in Gaza. And let's not forget that Hezbollah has made it clear they started their missile attacks on Israel in response to what's going on in Gaza, and that they would stop those attacks on Israel if the war in Gaza stops. So Hezbollah's point of view, they don't want to look weak. They want to maintain their air of solidarity with the Palestinians and use it as leverage to consolidate relations with Iran. So that's Israel. That's the Hezbollah agenda. From the Israeli point of view, it would be very, very costly for Israel to open a new front in southern Lebanon. The Israeli public, even though there is calls for a definitive and assertive response to Hezbollah, the Israeli public is exhausted and the Israeli military is exhausted with too many wars. So Prime Minister Netanyahu would be unlikely to pursue an all-out war with Hezbollah.
But Professor, this is what I wonder. If it was only saber rattling from the Israeli side, then why did Tel Aviv approve and validated a plan to attack Lebanon?
Well, it's all in anticipation. They want to be in a position of readiness, and they can use these in negotiations for end of hostilities. So it's all for leverage, in my view.
All right. And when it comes to the wider region, and especially Israeli onslaught on Gaza, if we are looking at an all-out war between Hezbollah and Israel, how do you think Israeli onslaught on Gaza is going to be impacted?
Well, it would be a major distraction for what the Israeli government and Israeli military is trying to achieve in Gaza. And that already is under a major cloud. The Israeli army has diverged from the official line, saying that destroying Hamas may not be possible. So a lot of analysts and observers have already made it clear that destroying Hamas is a bit of a pie in the sky, that Hamas represents a political force, an ideology, and it's not just a fighting force. Now the Israeli military has kind of acknowledged, repeated that analysis, which is diverging from the official line in Israel.
Right. Now, I just want to expand the discussion a little bit and talk about the international community. When we look at the rhetoric between Hezbollah and Israel, it seems to me that right now the rhetoric is limited between the leaders of Hezbollah and Prime Minister Netanyahu, because we don't see any major player from the region and, let's say, Israel's closest ally, the U.S., getting directly involved with these back and forth of arguments going on between Hezbollah and Israel right now. What do you think is the likelihood of the U.S. intervening to try to diffuse tensions? And what's the likelihood that countries like Iran will come to Hezbollah's aid?
Well, from the U.S. point of view, this whole war has been an unnecessary disaster, really, for U.S. foreign policy, U.S. image in the region. President Biden is going to pay a major political price for the U.S. support of Israel. So the U.S. administration has been trying to temper Israeli operations, been trying to warn them against excessive force. but really the US doesn't seem to have much leverage, or doesn't want to apply its leverage on Israel, because of course if they stopped the shipment of military aid and bombs, then it would make a big difference on how Israel would conduct its warfare. Other regional powers, Iran has already crossed the threshold and engaged with Israel directly. If there is open warfare between Hezbollah and Israel, I think Iran would be very likely to be brought into that conflict. So it's a very dangerous scenario.
Shahram Akbarzadeh, thanks very much for talking to us here on TRT World. I really appreciate your taking out the time.
Thanks for having me.